Have you ever seen something happen, and you just can't tear your eyes away? Like a car crash, but in, like, the political world.
I think I know what you mean.
Well, that's what we're looking at today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a total collision of, like, public anger and political reality.
Uh-huh.
It all went down at a town hall meeting with Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards.
Oh, yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, it was in Asheville, North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And let me tell you, it was a powder keg.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, so we're going deep on this one.
All right.
We got reports from NBC News, WLOS, and ABC News. They all covered it.
Cool, so we've got a few different perspectives on it.
Yeah, and that's good, right? Gives us, like, a more complete picture.
For sure, for sure.
And for you listening, what we want to do is get beyond just the headlines.
Right.
Like, what were the core issues that made people so angry?
Yeah, and what does that tell us about the bigger picture?
Exactly, especially, like, what people are really worried about these days. So picture this. Thursday evening, March 13th, 2025, Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
Congressman Edwards decides to hold this in-person town hall.
Bold move.
Yeah, and get this.
Hmm.
He did it against the advice of GOP leadership.
Interesting. Why'd he do that?
We'll get to that. But first, even the place where they held this thing is, like, a big clue.
Oh.
Yeah, it was at AB Tech Community College in a packed auditorium.
Okay, so a big crowd.
Huge. But get this. Over 2,000 people were demonstrating outside.
Wow.
And the auditorium could only hold, like, 360.
That's quite a difference.
Right. And all the news reports describe it as, like, rowdy and tense.
Not that.
Apparently, Congressman Edwards got hit with this, like, wave of boos and jeers. And everyone was giving him the thumbs down.
Not a good start.
Not at all. And when there were the signs people were carrying outside.
Yeah, what were those about?
So there were some Ukrainian flags and some Palestinian flags, which,
People are worried about what's going on overseas.
Right. But then there were these signs that said, "Fire Elon."
Whoa, that's pretty direct.
Yeah. It goes right to the heart of what people are upset about.
Like, they're not just unhappy with Congressman Edwards.
It's bigger than that, right?
Yeah.
They're concerned about the whole Trump administration.
And especially Elon Musk's role in it.
Bingo. Which brings us to the big issue.
What was that?
Federal job cuts. That's what really set people off.
I can see why.
Yeah, President Trump's been talking about these mass layoffs of federal workers.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk is, like, the point man for that.
Right. He's heading up that Department of Government Efficiency.
Exactly. And they're looking to fire thousands of people.
So people are scared about losing their jobs.
Big time. And they were bringing up specific things, too, like that VA memo.
Oh, yeah, the one suggesting they might lay off 80,000 VA employees.
That's the one. And someone in the audience straight up asked, how do you justify cuts to staff of the VA helping veterans?
Tough question.
It really hit a nerve. And then this retired veteran, Jay Carey, spoke up.
What did he say?
He's worried about them defunding the VA and what it would mean for flood victims in western North Carolina.
That makes sense. The VA plays a big role in disaster relief.
Yeah, so these aren't just abstract fears. It's real people's lives we're talking about.
Definitely.
And then there were the budget cuts.
Oh, right. Congressman Edwards was proud of voting for that House budget resolution.
Yeah, he said that and everyone just booed him.
Yikes.
It's because that budget plan includes some really deep cuts, potentially to programs like Medicaid.
Okay, so this is about more than just jobs. It's about access to health care, too.
Exactly. And, this budget resolution sets the spending targets for the whole federal government.
Right.
So when he says he's proud of voting for it and the crowd boos, it means there's a big disconnect.
Yeah, they don't agree on what the government should be spending money on.
Exactly. And there's this other thing that came up.
What's that?
Russia. People are worried about U.S. relations with Russia changing.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing those Ukrainian flags.
Right. And it's like global events are hitting home for people,
For sure. And that's something to keep in mind, how connected everything is these days.
Totally. And then there's Elon Musk again.
Ugh, what does he do now?
It's not just the job cuts. He's been talking about cutting entitlement programs, too.
You mean like Medicare and Social Security?
Yep. And he called the waste and fraud in entitlement spending the big one to eliminate.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
Right. And it plays right into people's fears about losing those safety nets.
Yeah, those programs are so important for a lot of people.
For sure. And then there's this woman, Leslie Boyd.
Okay.
She lost her son a few years ago because he couldn't afford health care.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, and she was basically begging Congressman Edwards to do something about high deductibles.
So it's like all these policy debates have real human consequences.
Absolutely. And speaking of Social Security,
Yeah.
someone asked him directly about protecting benefits.
And what did he say?
He said he wouldn't vote to dissolve or disrupt Social Security.
We'll have to see if he sticks to that.
Yeah, actions speak louder than words. Right?
Yeah, certainly.
So how did Congressman Edwards handle all of this?
I mean, he was in a tough spot.
He tried to talk about the House budget resolution at the beginning.
But we know how that went.
Total disaster. But later on, he put out a statement.
Really? What did it say?
He said that being accessible, listening, and answering questions for the people of Western North Carolina are among my favorite activities.
He said that after that town hall.
Yeah, I know, right?
Bold.
He also said he wants to dispel some of the misinformation currently being spread around.
Interesting.
And he's planning a teletown hall.
So maybe he's trying to find other ways to connect with people.
Maybe. And then he asked this question, like, why do we shy away from those conversations?
So he thinks it's important to engage, even when it's tough.
Sounds like it. But here's the thing.
What?
He held this town hall against the advice of the National Republican Congressional Committee. Yeah. And even House Speaker Mike Johnson was against it.
Wow.
They didn't want him to have these in-person meetings because of all the repeated constituent confrontations.
So they're worried about more situations like this happening.
Totally. And of course, the Republicans are saying that the Democrats organized the protesters.
Classic.
Right. But the Democrats are denying it.
Of course.
It's always like that. But for you listening, it makes you wonder.
Yeah, like how can you tell what's genuine and what's orchestrated?
Exactly. And meanwhile, the Democrats are capitalizing on all of this.
No, so.
They're holding their own people's town halls in Republican-held districts.
So they're trying to turn this into a campaign issue.
Definitely. And they're accusing the GOP of dodging their voters.
Smart move.
Right. But here's the interesting part.
What?
They're not targeting Congressman Edwards' district.
Why not?
Because it's considered solidly Republican, they're focusing on places where they might actually flip some seats.
Makes sense.
And the DNC chair, Ken Martin, said that the Republicans are terrified to be in the same room as the people who sent them to Washington.
Ouch.
Right. So it's clear that there's this huge partisan divide in how they're approaching this whole thing.
Yeah, it's two totally different strategies.
Absolutely. But let's go back to the town hall for a second.
Okay.
There was this moment where someone asked about the VA cuts, and everyone stood up and applauded.
Wow.
It was like this raw display of how strongly people felt about it.
Powerful stuff.
And it didn't end there. Things got so heated that security had to escort Congressman Edwards out.
They actually had to do that.
Yeah, it got that bad. And as he was leaving, someone shouted, "You don't get to do this to us."
I bet that made him think.
So what does all of this mean for you, the listener?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Congressman Edwards got an earful from his constituents.
Yeah, it wasn't just about one thing.
Right. It was about job losses, budget cuts, the VA, the whole direction of the Trump administration.
Basically, they feel like the government isn't working for them.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that this is happening all over the country.
Yeah, it's not just Asheville.
It's like this one town hall is a microcosm of what's going on everywhere.
So the Republicans are telling their people to avoid these kinds of events.
But Congressman Edwards went ahead anyway.
Yeah, and look what happened.
It's a tough call, right?
For sure. So it makes you wonder, how should elected officials be communicating with their constituents?
Especially when people are so angry and frustrated.
Exactly. And here's one last thought for you.
Okay.
If this one town hall was so intense, what does that say about the state of our political dialogue?
Yeah, like, are we even talking to each other anymore?
Yeah, like, are we even talking to each other anymore?
And what happens if this becomes the norm?
It's something to think about, for sure.
Especially as you watch this kind of stuff play out in your own community.
It's happening everywhere.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.